We are in a world right now where humans are pitted against humans, and it doesn't feel safe to speak up because, frankly, it's not. For the first time, just because I used my voice, I felt really uncomfortable in my community. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Unapologetically Yours podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Logan, and I'm so happy to have you here today. Unapologetically Yours is a podcast for the high performers, the dreamers, the doers, the people who are willing to be introspective about what they will accept in their life and what they won't. Here we go deep on everything from spirituality to relationships and connection to business and belief systems, because in a world when we've been taught to play by the rules, it's time to live unapologetically. Today, I want to talk to you about something that's been heavy on my heart and mind, and that is the state of advocacy and activism in this country. We will be talking, as a trigger warning, about the shooting death of Renee Good in Minnesota. And I want to start this with a note politically. I am someone who, in recent years, I definitely lean left of center. I am a former moderate. I am someone who has voted both red and blue. I live in a very purple community in a blue state. And what I am asking us to do in this episode is to have a moment of reverence, a moment of respect, and a moment of pause for what it means to be human right now. And it is deeply troubling for anyone who is paying attention, which I know that we all are, to what's happening in the political sphere right now. And the use of divisive language that is separating us from our neighbor. I would say that this moment in time has escalated since really the pandemic, and a division between those who would wear masks and those who wouldn't. The racial discord that arose after the murder of George Floyd, and seeing that language used to describe those who are willing to look outside of the MAGA sphere and examine the political climate are referred to now as left lunatics. And I said something about like the dangerous wine moms who are out there stopping ICE. And what is most important to me is the feeling of body safety. And that is something that, as a privileged white woman, in that I have been able to lean into. I have been able to be protected by the systems of patriarchy that also are simultaneously a prison for so many of us. And this is a time that calls for radical introspection about what it means to be a good neighbor, what it means to show up in your community, and what it means to create a country that is safe, accepting, warm, and joyous for our children. And with this level of political discord, it's not possible. I thought about declaring myself the new leader of the Democratic Party. Happy to go ahead and hand over the reins anytime someone wants to take them from me, because we are seeing a distinct lack of leadership on the left and a very, very coordinated effort on the right to reduce credibility for those who are willing to question the system. And what I've noticed is that a lot of the beliefs that propel MAGA and this divisive environment forward are rooted in fear and, frankly, racism and bigotry. There has been a rise in red pill culture where there are vile YouTubers who are committed to tearing down women who speak up. And it's frightening. I'll give you an example. Last April, I had on my podcast a really incredible woman who helps to advocate for more shared responsibility in the household. She is incredible. She has 4 kids in a dual income household. And she realized that she was feeling disconnected from her body, her life, in a state of severe anxiety, burnout, and a disconnection because she was carrying the weight of the whole household. One of these YouTubers, super conservative audience, predominantly men, featured a clip from one of her social media posts or her podcast about how she doesn't do her husband's laundry. And they absolutely ripped her to shreds. And simultaneously, I had had this woman on my podcast sharing about the mental load and what toll that takes on women's health and their relationships. And somehow my podcast was found by this group of people, and they went on to leave like dozens and dozens of 1-star reviews on my podcast on Spotify and left multiple comments on my YouTube page inciting violence, calling me a dumbass, and all sorts of things like that. Then recently, you guys know I talk about my connection to nature all the time. I was on a walk in my town and I noticed ice agents driving around and parked and a lot of increased activity. And I posted a video on my social saying like what I saw, what I did, which was nothing really. Like I just like kind of like stood near the cars that parked, and one of the guys there kind of like noticed me. I noticed him, and then he like drove away. There was no confrontation, no interaction, no discussion. I posted about this, and then I was shared in a Facebook group that is local to my dear town that was created under the guise of creating a safer community. What really ends up happening in this Facebook group is that people post anonymously vile things about Black and Brown and LGBTQ people within the community. They are book banners and refer to anyone in the community who disagrees with them as libtards and whatever the fuck else that we've all heard before. So my social media post was shared in that group, and I was called a Karen. And by the way, like I'm a very active member of the community. I give back. I have 3 little kids in the public school system, and I've also been here a long time and am known. And after that, the number of comments that I got on this video it was insane. People telling me to go get fucked more by my husband and on and on and on. Like just vile, disgusting, horrible commentary, primarily from men. And what I noticed is the next day when I went on my regular walk, I felt unsafe. I felt uncomfortable. I felt like eyes were on me. And for the first time, just because I used my voice, I felt really uncomfortable in my community. The post is on my page. You can go and check out the comments for yourself. It starts in our own communities, what we are willing to tolerate and what we are not. So I want to address this Facebook group that started the last couple years by a woman who has since founded a pack to help turn that is involved in a broader network of individuals who are trying to flip the state of Illinois to be red. And their primary agenda is to have more books, any books that are inclusionary, DEI related, have any sort of sexual education, any reference to families that might look different than what is considered typical. They want those books restricted and have made just a tremendous amount of noise with our school board to make sure that that happens. Simultaneously, this Facebook group has become an epicenter of just vile discussion. And I am a member of the community. I am a business owner. And I am and have been afraid to speak out. And that's because I am afforded some protections by playing along and playing nice in what it means to fit in society and not ruffle feathers, not rock the boat. And I am not sure if those who are now, by the way, this group is hosting a gala in January in my town and have made it look like this elite, glamorous event. And I am not sure that those who are invited to the event or who are attending the event are aware of the Facebook group and how absolutely misogynistic, rooted in deep racism, hate, and violence this group is. And the acceptance of the anonymous posts, like to me, it discredits them. I think that all of the posts that are anonymous should be attributed to the founder of this organization, who I do not know personally. I will say that. I have not yet invited her to speak with me or be a guest on the show. And I am considering that. And I just want to put that out there because I think it's really important to have an open dialogue when it comes to things that are happening within your own community. But because I didn't speak out earlier about them, I feel like their mission is more broadly accepted or normalized because of the branding, let's just say, of the invitation. So, activism and speaking up comes with a fair amount of risk. You risk being an outcast, you risk making people uncomfortable, you risk losing your livelihood. And if you're like me, a single mom, risk feeling safe in your own home. And that's a really frightening thing that in this country, which was founded on civil discord, which was founded on the ability to speak freely and voice when you're concerned, that can lead to one, feeling unsafe, two, being doxxed, which has happened to people in my community who have spoken out. And it is something that I think is really important for those who are in the conservative sphere to really examine if that's patriotism, if it's patriotism for someone to be doxxed for speaking out, if it's the intent for a woman who is concerned about what is happening within her community to feel unsafe for speaking up and voicing those concerns. And to me, that's not America. So when Renee Good was shot violently in the face, my body went into such an instant state of grief and fear and sadness. And this is the feeling that Black and brown folks have had for centuries. And all of us have been protected from this because of our whiteness, ultimately, and the systems that were created to serve whiteness and patriarchy. Watching this woman who is so adjacent to me and other people and women who are activists and who are actively trying to protect other members of the community, this was so alarming. And I want to break down a little bit about my concerns about ICE here. One, these are men largely who have gone through very, very limited training. They have been incentivized financially to wreak havoc. They wear masks. They are removing people from the street, men, women, children, without record, without the ability for them to contact an attorney, and in some cases, deporting them unlawfully. There was a case where a woman who was a Native American US citizen was like minutes away from being deported in this system of chaos. I believe, again, just left of center here in a fair legal immigration process. I believe it's important for us to reduce criminal activity in this country. And I believe that there's a better way to do it than this violent system that lacks accountability. And honestly, for any woman who is a survivor of sexual assault, by the way, 1 in 3 women have experienced some form of sexual assault or will experience it in their lifetime, which is just absolutely outrageous. The idea of being pulled into a van by a masked man without record, without a warrant, without any legal process to even keep record of your whereabouts is so absolutely, the fear of that and the anger of that strikes me right in my core. We can agree on a fair and lawful immigration system. Where you lose me is with this violent lack of accountability system that doesn't factor in people who are on the lawful path towards citizenship or are asylum seekers and any number of considerations that go into the immigration process. Now, when looking at the records that were released by Homeland Security, one can see plainly that a very small percentage of those who have been deported or detained by ICE were violent criminal offenders. And the vast majority of the people are actually being targeted for their skin color in racial profiling. And these are people. These are human beings who pay rent, who have families, whose children are in school, who are contributing to society. And let's just say that that is in 90% of the cases here. And I think that if one person gets deported unlawfully, then we have a problem. But this is far exceeding what anyone could imagine. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Renee Good and the adjacencies. So, here in this country, we are allowed to express free speech, our right to protest. And that right has been met with nothing but violence. Whether you think about what happened outside of the Broadview Detention Center, 6 miles from my home, where a pastor was shot with rubber bullets. Like, this is not the foundation of a free America. So when you think about the people who were defending, observing, filming what was happening within their own community, the chaos prompted by untrained ICE agents, and you have a woman who paid for her activism with her life by a man who shouldn't have drawn his gun, it hits really close to home. And dare I say that for the white suburban activists, I imagine this is what it felt like being a Black person and seeing what happened to George Floyd. This is so unnerving and unsettling. And the part that I think struck me the most, that I felt so deeply in my body, was him calling her a fucking bitch. Because if you are a woman, this is where, like, I just invite you to stand for a second outside of your lived experience. If you happen to be a white man listening to this, or someone who's never experienced something like this. I've had a man look me in the eye on more than one occasion and call me a fucking bitch, and feel with absolute certainty in my body that they would beat the shit out of me. I have known how to, since I was very young, how to placate that mindset, exactly what to say. Oh, no, you're fine. You're good. I think about Renee Good. Dude, I'm not mad at you. She's trying to diffuse the situation, trying to calm down this rage. And that is something that really sticks with me. That wasn't an issue of self-defense. That was an issue of hatred and rage directed towards women. And it's exactly that rage why women deserve the right to leave marriages where they don't feel safe and seen. By the way, I'm not saying that was the reason why I left my marriage, but just in general, men need to have the ability to protect themselves. And violence against women at the hand of men is rampant. And so when I think about the people out there reading different comment sections who are like, no, all of these violent immigrant killers and rapists, like, have y'all been paying attention? Have you been paying attention to the violence against women at the hand of white men? At the rampant sexual assault figures coming from college campuses? You don't care about violence against women unless that person is Black or brown, because then you can use it as a vehicle for racism and bigotry. And that, to me, it's where the fear comes in. You want to say that ICE is making our country safer because they're preventing all these violent criminals from being on the street. Meanwhile, women have been screaming from the rooftops for centuries about the violence that they've experienced at the hand of a protected class, white men. If you care, if you say that ICE is there to protect our citizens from violence, then care about the violence directed towards our citizens that comes from the hands of our citizens, from the hands of police officers, from the hands of people in power. To believe that this is an immigration issue is to be lying to yourself. This violence in our country comes from a different source. And to blame it conveniently on one class of people is to be missing the whole fucking point. I had to have a conversation with my daughter about Renee Good and her shooting. My daughter said, Mom, didn't you see ICE? I said, yeah, I did. And she's like, and you made a video and they called you a Karen. Yeah, they did. And they called me a lot worse. She's like, well, could this happen to you? I said, I'm going to try really hard for it not to, but it could. And she said, could it happen to me? And I thought about how my daughter sits in a school classroom every day and how I can't safely say that no, this violence wouldn't happen to her. And God, that broke my heart. If we want to create a world that is safer for our daughters, it doesn't start because a handful of transgender people are using the bathroom of their choice. That's not how we protect our daughters. How we protect our daughters is by addressing the problem of violence in this country that comes from a system that supports it and then points a finger at marginalized classes of people and blames them. Renee Good was killed because she was a lesbian. She was a crazy libtard. She was this. Name the insult, and she has received it. And I've seen it in the comments. And this is from the same group who was like outraged at people talking about Charlie Kirk after his death. And I want to say for the record, by the way, that I absolutely nauseated at Charlie Kirk being murdered for free speech. I think that we all should. I think they're adjacent. And what do we have in common with both of these people? They were shot by white men. And I'm not saying that all white men are the problem. That'd be ridiculous. I don't believe in putting people into categories in that way. I believe we are all human. But what I believe more than anything is that we are in a world right now where humans are pitted against humans. And it doesn't feel safe to speak up because, frankly, it's not. But the people who are safest to speak up are the men. So, men, if you are worried about your women and you want to protect them from sexual violence and you want to protect them from people getting in their faces and calling them a fucking bitch, and if you want to protect your daughters, please think about what you are willing to allow in your presence, because what you're willing to allow in your presence is what you're willing to tolerate everywhere. And I invite you to join us. Protect the women who you love. Don't look at your sister and be like, oh, well, you're okay. You're a feminist, but you're okay. You're one of the good ones. And then ostracize an entire group of feminists. Realize that all feminists are your sister. Think about the mother who raised you, a single mom, and think about all she did for you. And then don't think that she's not every mother. She's every mother. And when you allow people in your presence to disparage women, to call people names, you're allowing it everywhere. And I think that's really the big lesson that I learned for myself with all of this. It was scary for me to share an absolutely benign video about seeing ice in my town and my reaction to that. And the response to it made me feel afraid. It made me added extra security to my home. It made me think twice about speaking up. Meanwhile, there's a group of people who are very much not afraid to speak up and speak their minds, and the finger pointing and the bigotry, and all of it's happening right here in my town. And I have decided that despite being afraid, despite losing maybe social protection, that I can't not speak up, because what I'm willing to tolerate here is what I'm willing to tolerate everywhere. And I believe in civil discord. I believe that we have so much more in common as people than we do differences. And I believe that when we let fear drive our systems and drive our beliefs, that we get off course really quickly. And so I invite you to take a moment and examine how you're talking about your neighbor. And this starts even with just broad generalizations of classes of people. And I invite you to reach across the table and have conversations that build connection, not tear people down, not call someone a libtard for feeling physically unwell at the thought of someone undeserving being dragged by a masked man into a detention center without representation. That night, after I had the conversation with my daughter, we were saying our prayers, and she was at her dad's house. And so we were on FaceTime. And she said, well, Mom, we should pray for that woman who was shot. Was she a mother? I said, yeah, she was a mother. She's like, okay, well, we should pray for her family too. And I said, I agree. And I said, and you know who else we should pray for? She said, who? And I said, we should pray for the shooter because his life is never going to be the same. She said, why would we pray for him? He did something so awful. I said, because he is a human and humans are all created in the image of God. We are flawed. We have dreams. We have fears. We have beliefs, and they all come from our own lived experiences. But if we let fear drive us, then we become part of the problem instead of part of the solution. And I want to say too that it is normal to be afraid in times like this. I'm afraid of speaking up, but courage doesn't mean that you don't have fear. It means you act anyway. And I encourage all of us right now who are feeling the divide to be willing to speak up and ask for something better because we all deserve something better. And that better should be rooted in love of each other, mutual respect, so that we can find joy, so we can protect our children and laugh with them and walk down our streets safely, so that we can leave them in a world where they don't have to be afraid. It sounds so idealistic to say those words. There are some people who are criminals. There are some people who do bad things. And we've got to acknowledge that. And they should be held accountable. But this country was founded on being able to share when something doesn't feel right. I want us to think of the double standards here that exist. And I want us to acknowledge the human experience. And we are all different, and that is beautiful. And that we all can exist together, but we don't need to push someone down to rise. And so much of this country has been built by standing on the shoulders of others when we could stand side by side. No woman deserves to die hearing the words, you fucking bitch. But I know many, many, many women who've heard those exact words said to them. No person deserves to be dragged off the street by someone in a mask and not know where they're going. And we don't deserve to be put down, belittled, and demeaned for being someone who doesn't believe that that is what's good. And that's what's going to build our country on a foundation of excellence. And certainly that is not what our founding fathers should have been, founding fathers and mothers. But anyway, such were the nature of the times. I don't believe that we should be silencing entire groups of people's voices. And I think there's a huge amount of propaganda with that. And when you start to believe that entire classes of people are evil or stupid or misinformed, you got to start to look inward at where we're missing the humanity. And that applies to liberals as well. Start having meaningful conversations. Try to put your fears aside and start to build the world that we want to see right here in our communities. Share what you will tolerate and what you will not, so that there can be accountability, so that we can have honest conversations, and so that we can build trust and leadership and stop this madness. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I spoke from my heart without a script, without an agenda, and I'm here to hear your thoughts. I share in your grief. If you are someone who was so deeply shook by the killing of Renee Good, I'm with you because I am her. We all are. No one wants to be shot for trying to do the right thing. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me an email at podcast@unapologeticallyyours.com and drop me a comment, and I will be sure to get back to you. And all of you really, really, really angry men who are going to think that this is an attack on you, go easy on my ratings. I am a person. I am just like your sister, just like your mother is a person, just like your wife. And no one deserves that. Treat others the way you would like to be treated. Thanks so much. I'm Ashley Logan, and I am unapologetically yours.